Welcome to Rick Rack Ruby. I'm Laura Cluvo. Today we will be making 2 Christmas tree ornaments. These are made from the Winterly collection by Robin Pickens for Moda. They're fun and easy, so let's get started. When I opened my fat quarters, I started pulling out all the greens, all the reds, all the whites, and I realized that this print right here really is my favorite. And I kind of zeroed in on this little tree motif right here. I like the way that the branches are angled, and I also like that one side is this shade of green and the other side is a different shade of green. So I wanted to sort of mimic that in my first project. I divided up the greens into this shade, like the lime shade, and this shade, which is more of the forest green shade. And I cut these fabrics into strips. There are, the widest strip is 1.5. And then the narrowest is 1 inch, and then in between I have 1.25 inches. I didn't quite have as many of these lime green fabrics, so I'm supplementing. I'm thinking I might be able to just sort of cut from the green section of this poinsettia print, or perhaps use this white, which has enough in it that I think it'll work. And let's get started. So I'm starting with a 5-inch square of heavyweight non-fusible interfacing. You could use midweight. This is just what I had. So on one square, I hope there's enough contrast for you to see that. On one square, I'm going to line up the darker green strips, and I'm going to stitch them. I'll start with sort of a wide one at the bottom, and then, you know, a different width, and then I'll just right sides together, flip and press, right sides together, flip and press, until the whole square is covered. And I'll be right back. Here's my first strip, and there's no real mystery to it. I just wanted to show you that I'm using a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to fold and press this. Then I'll cut off this side here, and then I'll just go to the next strip. My squares are patched, and so now I'm going to trim the edges, get all the little bits away from the edges, and then I'll sew around the entire square very close to the edge, just to kind of keep everything together. When I'm sewing around the edge of the square, I usually do it from the back. My squares are finished, and I stitched around the edge, and now I'm going to thread my machine with this turquoise thread. I was aiming for this turquoise color in the print, and originally I used something a little bit lighter, and I really prefer this darker shade. This is Maxi Lock Radiant Turquoise, but you can use whatever you have. I'm going to thread my machine with this color, and then we're going to do decorative stitches along each one of these seams. I have favorite stitches that I tend to always go to, and you know, you'll have to see on your machine which decorative stitches will work for you. Here are my squares with the machine embroidery. The lime color only has 5 strips, and this one, the forest green, has 6 strips. To be honest, the collection really only has 3 really lime prints, so you kind of have to work with whatever else you like in the collection. All right, so this part is the only secret, the only trick that you want to get right. Okay, here are my 2 squares side by side. A couple of the prints are directional, like this little bird is right side up and these trees are right side up. But honestly, as you're making the project, it's hard to maintain that orientation. So make sure that these seams are all parallel, and then flip them right sides together. Then we're going to stitch along this diagonal line so that when we open it, you can see that these seams come into the center like this. Now, my nature is to want the branches to go down, but in this case, we're going to have the branches going up like this. Also, you can see this orientation is now upside down. It's pretty hard to figure out how to get them all exactly right, and so I'm not going to worry about it. Also, I like to draw a line from here to here and stitch on the line so that I make sure that I have as little waste as possible, because the offcuts from the opposite side, we're going to stitch together and make a second tree. It'll be a little bit smaller, but it's still very worthwhile. So I'm going to draw a line here and stitch, and I put green thread back in my machine. Okay, here I have sewn this center seam on the diagonal, and when I open this up, and again, I want the branches to come like this, down. Let's see, it does look like this is right side up, so I think I'll use this side. And this will be like this. And just so you see where we're going, I have a pattern. I've cut a window template. This is a triangle. It's about 4 1/4 inches tall and 4 inches wide, and then I just rounded off the corners. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off this part. So again, this is the part that I'm using, this, and I'm going to have the branches coming this way. So I'm going to carefully, with just a nice straight seam allowance, cut this. And then I'm going to save these. Actually, I could sew them right now. Yeah, and I'm going to sew this along the diagonal. And there we go. I have this smaller square and this larger one. And I'm going to go to my iron and press this seam flat on both of these pieces. All right, so I'll show you, this is how the back looks with the seam allowance pressed open. And then I have my window template, and then it's kind of a game to get the top patch to be evident. And remember, you have a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch seam allowance too. And then also to get enough of the very bottom corners to show. And when I say I want the branches to come this way, so that is so they're slanted downward toward the center, like that. So I will trace this with my little silver pen and cut it out right on the line. For the trunk, I'm going to use this brown velvet ribbon, about maybe 3 inches. I'll measure it. Oh, it's exactly 3 inches. Then I'm going to fold it and place it right here with the raw edges at the bottom like this. I'm going to secure it with some tape. I'm going to first I'm going to secure the ends together so that they don't shift while I'm sewing. That seems good. And then another piece to hold it to the fabric. Maybe you can always pin it if you like. Now I'm going to stitch this down, just the ribbon and close to the seam allowance. I mean, about a scant 1/4 inch in, so that it'll match up with the seam when I sew this all together. Great, there's how it looks. That's sewn fairly securely. And for the back of the tree, of course, I'm going to use this one, my inspiration print. You can see I've already made a few of these in my practices. but I'll just pin this here and then trim around it. I don't have to trim close, like I don't have to cut the exact same shape. Just kind of cut around it like this. And then starting here, I'll backstitch and go all the way around and stop here and backstitch. That looks good. I got a little wonky my first time over here, so I just went back a second time and rounded that out. I like to cut this out with pinking shears. It's a little bit messy, so I'm going to go over the trash can to do this, but that way there's no clipping. You know, it serves the same role as clipping into your curves. I was very careful when I cut it out not to cut through those stitches that are holding my ribbon. So now I'm just going to turn it right side out. And stuff it. Have a nice quality ultra plush polyfill stuffing. I'm sewing up the opening in the ornament with a ladder stitch. I started it a few minutes ago, but I forgot to turn on my camera, so I'll just describe it. You stitch through the fold on the front or the back, like that, right at the fold, and then stitch straight across. So in this case, I'll be going right through the ribbon, both layers, through to the other side. This I think of as like the rung of the ladder, and this is the side of the ladder where I stitch through the fold. Again, this time the fold is in the front of the ornament, like that. And then I go straight across and through the ribbon, but of course on either side of the ribbon, I'm just sewing through the fold in the fabric and straight across. I went back and forth, so once that way and once that way. I feel like that's nicely reinforced and I like the way it looks. So I'm going to go ahead and secure my thread. Now finally, I'm going to use this turquoise and white baker's twine to sew a hanging loop. I love the way there's a little bit of red right at the tippy top of the tree. Anyway, I'm just going straight through, making it nice and long, and then I'll tie an overhand knot. Since those ends are uneven, I'm going to trim the ends, and there we go. I'm going to say this one's done, but we have our second square, and this one I'm going to add some embellishment. I can just about fit this, and I think I might actually use this because it's right on the edge, but considering there is a seam allowance, I think I'll be okay, and it's great to be able to fit a second. That's why I cut that seam allowance so small when I was sewing on the diagonal, and then I cut the seam allowances very, very, very small. I think this will work. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this with my silver marker and cut it out. And then we're going to embellish this with some white rickrack and some little star appliques. Now my only tip for adding trim is not to make it bottom heavy. So don't start way down here. Usually I start at the top, to be honest, but I just wanted to forewarn you. So I'm going to pin this, and it'll be, I think, about 4 times. I'd like to do an odd number, but it just never seems to work out for me. And you'll also see, if you look carefully, you can see that these motifs are upside down, which is why I chose this one for the embellishment, because it might disguise that a little bit. And then I have these little star appliques, so I can just add the stars wherever I want to kind of hide that. All right, so I have my machine threaded with white thread, and always in the back of my head, I know there is a little seam allowance there, so I don't want to start it way up here because you'll lose it. So I'm going to start about right here. And then pin. And I'll be removing these pins as I go. I could glue stick it too, but that gets kind of confusing because you're flipping it from like front to back, if that makes sense. So there's like a little fold right there. And the fold can be all the way off the edge or not. You just don't want it to get caught when you're sewing. You can also cut this if you want to make 4 separate pieces. There we go. This is going to be the last one. So 1, 2, boom, 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 boom. If you want to be very artistic, you could loop and scoop like that, but I have a hard time making that look. Like one might be way dipped and the next one isn't. It just never quite works for me. Anyway, I'm going to just stitch this right through the center of the rickrack to here, and then lift, pivot to here, lift, pivot, and stitch that rickrack in place. And once again, I will make the trunk from this little velvet ribbon. This time I think I'm going to try just glue stick. So first I'll stick the ends together. You know, I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it's very dry here, and glue sticks dry out in about a month. So it's a miracle I have a glue stick that still works. So I'm lining that up, and again, this is just 3 inches of ribbon. And then it's going to go like this. And instead of using that tape, I'm just going to pin it. And then I'm just going to go across right here a few times. I put green thread back in my machine. Here's how it looks. Just straight across right there, trying to center this and trying to keep it straight. We'll see how long that lasts. And then once again, we're going to use this as the back. So right sides together. And then I'll just kind of cut around it. I'm not trying to match up the edge. And then I will go around the outside and leave an opening for turning right here. Okay, that looks good. So I will cut it out with my pinking shears and turn it to the right side. And then once again, a reminder not to accidentally trim the ribbon and remove the stitches that are holding the ribbon right there. I left a nice seam allowance in the center here, and I had plenty to sort of tuck in and make it nice and smooth. And now I'm going to close up the opening with a single strand of green thread and a ladder stitch. Okay, so I have a single strand of green thread and I have a generous knot in the end, and I'm going to secure this knot in the seam here inside the fold in the back. Okay, then we're going to do a ladder stitch. I'm coming straight across and then skipping through. So the straight across is like the tread of the ladder, and then the forward stitches are like the sides of the ladder, or you can think of like a railroad track. So I'm going across, and then I'm going straight across from the front fold to the back fold, and then moving forward through the back fold, then straight across to the front fold, and then moving forward through the front fold. And then now I have that ribbon. So now I'm going to go straight through through the ribbon to the back fold. There we go. And I still have that pin in there, it's helping. Then I'm going to skip forward just one little stitch like that. And then back through the ribbon to the front fold. And then I'll just continue all the way up to the end of the opening, and then I might just go back again. And then when I take out the pin, you'll see everything looks really good. Now we just have a couple more steps. Number one is to stitch a hanging loop. And I'm using this turquoise and white baking twine, but of course you could use red and white, you could use a solid color, you can use floss, whatever you like. And in terms of the embellishment on the front, like the stitching and the rickrack and the appliques, you can use whatever you like. You could use red trim or you know, lace, buttons, sequins, anything you like. Now these little stars are from this lace that I got from Temu. And I haven't really used the lace, you know, as it's intended, but I have been cutting these off. Let's see. There are, I think, 3 sizes. So there's this mini, and then there's kind of a medium, and then a large. So let's use those. I have my glue gun ready to go, and let's see. I was kind of concerned about this print being upside down, but now you can't even tell. So I think I'll put this one down here, maybe this over here, maybe one down here, and maybe one up here, maybe over here, maybe like that. Don't put them too close to the edge. Look, they'll kind of disappear around the sides. Here, let me show you how this looks. Here's the side, here's the back, and here's the front. All right, so I'm just gonna hot glue these. I'll start with the largest. This little baby one, way down here. And then maybe this one over here. And this one over here. Great, that looks good. And then, you know, this one looks so plain now, right? But it has its own sort of look. It's a little more sophisticated. Here are just a couple of additional examples. This one I used a narrower ribbon, and I made this one a little bit smaller from the second set of triangles. And also the embroidery, the color that I used for the embroidery is a little bit lighter. But I don't know, I just felt like the dark color, it just looks better to me. And then again, this has the lighter color of embroidery and all of the appliques. Thank you for watching my tutorial. If you're enjoying my videos, please like, share, and subscribe.